Are you searching for that voice of reason in these troubled times? Do some things just not make sense? We thought so too, and that's exactly how Dave, Richard, and I came together. My name is Kelsey, and the three of us are here to explore and seek the truth, expose corruption, and unravel and untwist media lies and propaganda. We are determined to help navigate through this unparalleled, extraordinary time in history with everyday people emphasizing open mindedness, free thinking, and a desire to be empowered at the grassroots level, working with what nature has given us and protecting that from those who are exploiting it. Together, with the help of our listeners, we will sow acres of truth. You can visit our website at acresoftruth.com, and here you will find more information on how you can find us in places like YouTube, Rumble, Spotify and Apple Music, Twitter, and so much more. Welcome to this very special edition of Acres of Truth. Tonight we are sitting down with Tajana, who has been making waves over on TikTok with her videos about smart cities, land use bylaws, and how the Sustainable Development Agenda of the UN has methodically been infiltrating our communities for years right under our noses, and how it aims to enslave humanity. Tajana has been researching all of this for many, many years, and let me tell you, she is a firecracker and she knows her stuff. My name is Kelsey, along with Dave and Richard. We are Acres of Truth, and I couldn't be more excited to introduce you to this amazing gal who has spent so much time investigating and researching as a citizen journalist. This girl has the spirit and no give up attitude that we could all adopt. She hails from rural northern Alberta. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Tajana. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I truly appreciate this and I feel honored.
Well, we're happy to have you here.
And welcome, I'm Dave from Winnipeg.
Welcome. I'm Richard from Southern Saskatchewan.
And I'm Kelsey, a small business owner from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. So let's start at the beginning, Tajana. I've been following you for some time now and have come to know you through your videos that you are from Bosnia and went through a war and lived in a refugee camp before coming to Canada. You've talked about how this adversity has helped you to see clearly what's really going on behind the smoke and mirrors. So I was hoping you could tell our listeners a little bit more about that.
Well, I was born in former Yugoslavia in what is known today as Bosnia, but I'm half Serbian. And so when the war started, we were in it for about 6 months and started to flee. And then we fled to Switzerland, where we spent 5 years kind of jumping from different refugee camps until the Swiss government basically gave my parents a letter and told them that the situation back in Bosnia has settled down. The war is over, but it really wasn't. The tensions were still high. Crime was super high. The economy was basically at nothing. I mean, it was just a war-ridden country. So my parents decided to apply to Canada, New Zealand, United States, and Australia. And Canada accepted us, and that was actually my parents' first choice because Canada was known as, you know, a very safe country, friendly country, a country with a diversity in its fabric. And I mean, everything about it kind of really spoke to us. So we came here 26 years ago, and I adopted fairly well, went to school here and everything. And now I'm fighting for Canada the way I think I would have fought for my own country had I been this age at that time in Yugoslavia before all of this started.
Yeah, and you talked a little bit earlier today with me about this and how it's really helped you to be able to see what's going on here currently.
Yeah, well, I kind of come from a different perspective. I mean, Yugoslavia was a social communist that was quite different from Marxist and other communist, I should say, ideologies. And so at a young age, we were almost taught what communism was and how it creeps into countries. I guess our parents kind of knew if we could change the future or if it would creep in again, the way Soviet Russia had it. that we could avoid it. So when I came to Canada, I thought honestly I was safe, in the sense that I did not think communism would come to the West. However, when I was super young when I got into politics, I started to realize that the UN would actually creep in communism throughout the entire world, not just the West. And even the little bit of signs that I did see, at an early age, especially with Agenda 2021 rolling out in the Paris Climate Accord Agreement, and then going back into history even before I was born, talking to older generations about basically the playbooks that were used when they were growing up, and then seeing the similarities of propaganda and their playbooks being used on us, but in a different context. I started to realize that this is just a generational pattern of how they pretty much keep us enslaved. But with each generation, they chip away at more and more of our rights. And then each generation being born into the new set of rights, believes that they've had the most freedoms, when in fact they've probably had about 20 to 30% of it stripped by the time they're born, without knowing the previous generation and what they've had. So I've pretty much been very loud at a very young age. I'd say probably 21, about what is going on. However, because the way they do play this out is in puzzle pieces and very small areas, so that no one can see the larger picture. But I started to put the larger picture together, and it's basically what's playing out now. And it's a very sinister plan that they have. And this exact same plan has been seen in Eastern Europe, when they have tried to pretty much enslave everybody using communism and Marxism.
Yeah, exactly. And in reference to those patterns and puzzle pieces, we're going to come back to that in a short bit here. But right now, Tiana, a lot of people are buzzing about smart cities, and that's kind of how we came together today. And it's interesting to see what's going on social media, and how a lot of people are talking about that since the recent announcement by Edmonton and their application to become a smart city. And actually a part of that, of the smart cities, is a part of the UN Sustainable Agenda, formerly 2021 and now 2030. Most people are unaware of the 17 goals that make up this agenda, and that actually goal number 11, sustainable cities and communities, is where this falls under. So there was recently an uproar this past couple of weeks after a gentleman was reading that land use bylaw in the Thorhild County where he was from, because there was a little bit of there was well, we're going to talk about that in a bit, but he was aware that something was going to be rewritten in the bylaws, and so he decided to take it upon himself to read his land use bylaws in Thorhild. And he quickly realized that something sinister was going on. And that was how the uproar sort of began. And that is, I believe, when things really started to ramp up on social media with all the talk. And then, as I understand it, during that time frame that you were made aware of it, you spent 4 days researching it. And I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about that process.
Yeah, so I have a lot of people on TikTok, and they'll send over a bunch of information towards me. And somebody sent me, I guess, Thorhild's land use bylaw amendments, and I started to read into exactly what they wanted to do, regarding sheds, how many chickens you're allowed to have, just basically going down the list of restrictions that you're allowed and not allowed to do on your own land. And that made me mad, because I'm rural Alberta as well. And I figured, if this is happening in this county, eventually it will happen in all counties. They will just go slowly. So I basically just took it upon myself to gather all the key players that are involved, and then just started calling them. And I called the GSA group. I told them who I was. I basically told him that this is kind of make it or break it for his company. If he is involved, directly asked him if he was involved with the UN or the Canadian government, if he was receiving any subsidies, and if he lied to me that I would find out. Called my mayor, called the mayor of Thorhild, which I'm not even part of that county, and pretty much, I don't know if I'm allowed to say, but like reamed him a new one, and told him that what he was doing, just kind of ripped him a little bit, and basically told him what he was doing, and that even though he thinks that he will be getting money, that eventually they would come after him and his land, and to really educate himself. And then I made the video online, which went absolutely viral, and people from Thorhild and other counties just basically started hounding not just the GSA group, but also the mayor and the city council. And 4 days later, I get a message, hey, you know what, the whole thing was dropped. Basically, they're not going forward with the amendments or anything at all anymore. And so then I decided to call my mayor, and he already knows I'm a pain in the rear end. So he basically said that he wasn't even going to touch on it because he saw the social media posts and people were calling him based on my TikToks, which I kind of feel bad, even though our county has nothing to do with it. But so he's aware now. People in Grand Prairie are calling me, and they're having a meeting next weekend, or I believe next Monday. So they're starting to kind of band together and get together and really spread the message out there. And so I figured, I'm like, you know what, I know it's a small little victory, and I know they'll try again, but at least this way people are more aware, and they can't really pull any of these in the shadows, which is how they work. They pull all of these resources together, and they market it to us as, I say, fluff, happy fluff with sinister, I guess, background. I'm not really sure how to say it. Sorry, English is my fifth language, and sometimes I lose words. But they have sinister, I guess, ideas behind the marketing fluff. And so at least now we're shining the light on them, and they can't really do these things in the shadows anymore, which is going to make it a lot harder for them to implement the plans that they want.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're all trying to do together, right? Is shine a light on the truth. And, that's exactly how, Richard, Dave, and I came together as well. And it seems as though this light is getting brighter, and it's getting harder for them to hide behind in those dark shadows, right? So that's an amazing story and an amazing outcome. And a lot of gratitude for all of the work, the investigation and research that you've been doing as well. I just wanted to go a little bit into some of the particulars about how did we even get here. Before we get to that, we should probably clarify the GSA group. I believe that it was you that uncovered who they were, where they're from, where they've set up. Just maybe tell us a little bit more about that.
So the GSA group is basically a consulting group that works with the counties, and they basically put their recommendations into a legal document. And they're allowed to recommend certain bylaws, such as where land, how land will be subdivided, but they're not allowed to really put anything else in there. And I think I caught the poor gentleman or the owner of that company off guard. So when I started hounding him with questions, he just spilled the beans. He told me everything. He's like, no animal bylaw does this. These guys said this. This is who's making the decisions for this. And I'm like, this is perfect. I just started taking notes. And basically what they do is they take all these recommendations from either council members or mayors or animal bylaw, and they just basically put it in a legal document. And that's all they do. And I believe that after I told him, because he was getting a bunch of hate calls from a previous video, basically he got scared, and he told the counties that he would either pull out of the agreement completely with them, or that they would have to shut it down. So I think he also had something to do with them shutting down the amendments, and also basically the entire law that they wanted to put in, or bylaw. And so I think the more we find out, the more we find these groups, I don't think they're willing to actually put their own name on the line for the sinister agenda like they thought they could. So the GSA group is basically just a consulting firm, and there are a bunch of them in completely different cities, and all of them basically work on government funding with these municipalities.
Okay, great. Thanks for that explanation. Let's come back to the patterns and puzzle pieces that you've noticed over the years. And I think a lot of us that are listening to this have been noticing something has been awry. A lot of us are in different stages of that process. But let's talk about one of the corner pieces in this puzzle, and that's the Paris Accord. You call that the head of the beast. And by your definition, let's just start off there and go into some of these other things that are all kind of trickling down from that.
Well, basically, I believe that it started with the Paris Accord Agreement and having all 197 countries sign on to it. And so the minute I started seeing countries sign on to something that the UN made, and the UN is basically the head of the beast when it comes to the New World Order. From there on, you have like the WHO and NATO, and it's basically, I don't know if anyone's read George Orwell's 1984, the ministries. You've got the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Truth, and so forth. Basically, if you take that analogy and you put it on the UN, anything the UN makes to combine all the countries together will eventually be what controls the countries through the UN agreements. So when the Paris Accord Agreement came out, and then I believe there was a Kyoto Agreement and so forth and so forth, I started seeing that pyramid slowly being built from the top down. And that's kind of how they've worked throughout the ages to basically control us in masses. Is they will grow the head of the snake, and then they will slowly start making a pyramid downwards, and with each level comes pretty much branching of further out of, I should say, bricks of the pyramid, so that people can't really put the entire image together. And slowly throughout the years, with these agreements, then came the SDGs, and then from there, they had the 169, I guess, goals, and each goal was basically given to a different district. So when you look at it, like the C40.org group basically goes after countries, and then in the countries, you have people that go after certain states or provinces, and then within the provinces, different cities, and then within the provinces, different municipalities. So that way, it's super hard for someone to actually come in and look at what they're doing on a global scale. So it basically just looks like innocent little city projects with just, volunteers, NGOs, non-government organizations that are not threatening to us as people. And when you take and put the entire image together of what they're doing, then you realize, oh, okay, this is what's happening. Basically, they are working pyramid down towards up, and now they're basically just gathering all of what they wanted, but in smaller pieces without us realizing what's going on.
So the Green Space Alliance, just by the wording, Green Space Alliance tells me all I need to know. So, their head office in Canada is in Edmonton, correct? But they also have two offices in Edmonton and one in USA. So they are a global corporation. I understand from a municipal level that I even find it odd that they went to GSA, because they should be going to their rural economic development as opposed to going right to GSA, which more concentrates on city policies and structure of developing cities. So I guess my question is how did this RM actually circumvent? Because RMs usually run, I believe in Alberta, it's the RMA, right? The Rural Municipalities of Alberta. Here in Saskatchewan, we got SARM, which is the Saskatchewan Association of Rural Municipalities, but the same. But your jurisdictions run under six, here in Saskatchewan anyways, under six basically divisions of the province. And there's a head board of directors of six people that all us councils sit underneath. So then as it moves forward, we would talk to them about policies that we need and different legal issues. If perhaps that pops up in RM, we talk to our board of directors. They refer us to the certain group that will take care of that. Now, obviously, the GSA group must be part of the RMA in Alberta. Is that correct? Is that what your findings found? Or
No, they're actually a private group. And the reason why they are a private group is because the government of Canada, on their website in small print, actually put that the money that they're receiving for any of these changes to either cities or 15-minute cities will not go to individual Canadians or nonprofit organizations, but that they will go to hand-picked government groups. So that is the fine print. That is why the GSA was picked. And the GSA also has 2 offices in India, where they basically implement the same kind of, I guess, ideas overseas. And so when I called the gentleman, he said that he was in operations for 10 years and so forth. And I asked him why they chose him. And apparently, well, not apparently, but I have proof that they have been pretty much working with certain municipalities around northern Alberta for the last 10 years. So this has been in the works for 10 years. And surprisingly, it's all of those municipalities that are basically having issues with land grabs and the land use bylaw amendments. So there is an inner working network, and they are funneling pretty much funds to the GSA group, who then just puts this in legal documents. And this was set up by the government of Canada.
yeah, would that be under basically their I guess with smart cities, they have a smart city challenge right on the government of Canada website, which, basically governments, the way they control population is under 3 tactics. They either legislate it, they coerce it, by narratives, or they institute bribery to lead the population. But yeah, so I would say that underneath the private public partnerships, this company is one of the private partnerships with the government of Canada and the governments in Alberta, that they are the chosen ones to write the policy and dictate the policy. So they have a partnership with Canada somewhere, and Alberta especially.
They do, yes. However, it's the mayors that get the incentives for what rules go in there. So they have it very well controlled within the structure of, I guess, these private groups and the Canadian government. It almost seems that it's all impossible for a regular person to kind of navigate and get into the system unless something like this gets leaked, and then we start putting the puzzle pieces together, because they actually have to have everything out there on their own. If the GSA group was privately owned, that company, I believe, that wanted to get the government, how should I say this? He wouldn't have given up so easily. The gentleman I spoke to was fairly scared that he would have a bunch of angry Albertans at his doorstep and at his company's doorstep. And he actually went and called the Thorhild municipality and basically told them that I don't think this will go through. He sounded fairly scared, and I believe that if he was actually handpicked by the government, he wouldn't have been that afraid to put his own company out there. I think that they make certain bids without all of the players knowing what's involved. And that way, if everyone's kind of kept in the dark and they only know certain pieces, it's a lot easier for the government to kind of dictate what's going in there, with incentivizing with money, of course.
So do you think that some of these names, perhaps a person has a clean conscience and may have unwittingly been selected or allowed themselves to be selected for this agenda, and perhaps it was portrayed under a different image? Do you think that as we see some of the weaker blocks crumbling away, that we're going to be faced with much stronger opposition, somebody who's going to strong handle that and really kick it up a notch? Or do you see that bottom layer of that pyramid just slowly eroding as people like you and I and the rest of us in this group where we're taking a stand and we are wanting to impact change and make a difference?
I see them eroding, because they seem to flee like rats anytime light is kind of pointed their way. Even with this group, I did not think that they were going to give up that easily. I mean, I may have ripped him a new one, but I wasn't in any way threatening the guy. I just said, you're about to get a bunch of protests outside of your building. I'm like, you better get all your stuff in order that you're not guilty of this. And you can tell that some of the information I even told him, he didn't realize what was going on. And the mayor seemed like he knew a little bit more than the gentleman at GSA, and the council members, I don't think they knew much of what was going on either. So I think they're all being kept in the dark, but once they realize that they're actually on the cutting board as much as we are, I think that bottom layer will erode. And then if we keep shining the light on these people and not allowing them to grow in the shadows, I actually think they will come crumbling down. Because every other time that they have done this, they have wanted a revolution and a war. And in war, there's a lot of chaos. And in chaos, after a war, no one really knows who the good guy or the bad guys have been. And that is how they've always managed to keep themselves in power. And that is why I keep telling everybody, we don't need war, we don't need protests, and we definitely do not need to start splitting up as a country into provinces. What we need to do is educate ourselves, educate our mayors, educate basically everybody around us so that they cannot come in through the back doors and through loopholes to try and basically put the blinds over our eyes. I don't think anybody stronger will come and take over just because they are weak as it is. So I've been studying the elites for many years. One, they're very low IQ people. They're just very narcissistic, and they've managed to convince us that they are above all and that they put themselves on pedestals. And by us acknowledging that, we're giving them power. However, most of them, I mean, if you kind of look at the combined IQ of Justin Trudeau and Biden, I mean, a rock is smarter. And these are the people that we are giving this kind of power to. And so I feel like if we start basically going after them in a legal sense of the way, they will have a hard time basically building that foundation. And we are their foundation. And all we have to do is stand up and basically say no to them. And they have no powers. Like tomorrow, if we just did a worldwide strike for 3 days, it would be mayhem. Like the banks wouldn't get their money, no one would be paying their bills, and then what are they going to do, evict the entire planet? Where are we going to go? And so that's why I keep telling people, I'm like, there is power in numbers, and if we can just get organized, stay calm, stay very tactful the way they have, and play the long game just like they have, but we turned it around on them, I think we have a huge chance of winning and actually for once living in peace without them messing up our lives and playing with basically our lives as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I do think that we are going to win, and we will see it through to the other side. However, the compassionate side of me wants to minimize the damage for, let's say, that 20-30% that are still asleep and don't get it, and for the other, that group in the middle, to rally as many as them as we can, to get this thing moving and get it moving quickly, because as time passes through, the situation is going to get more and more desperate. And I can't help but think, at what point they start throwing ridiculous amounts of money at these people to take on these bids, whether it's the mayors, the town councils, the RMs. Right now, I see that, or I have a sense that there isn't a whole lot of money being thrown there. There are some incentives, obviously, but not. It's not blatantly obvious how much is being thrown out, and so they're doing whatever work that they value that dollar and cent is. So do you have any perspective on that, or have you heard any numbers or anything more than just speculation?
I haven't heard any numbers, and I don't want to put speculations out there just because I know how rumors spread and how that could be a wildfire. But with the incentives, and I've even said this to my mayor, I told him, I'm like, you can get all the incentives you want, but there's nowhere to run. We're all on this planet together. You can't run away. Once they start taking our land, they're gonna come for yours too, and then your money's going to be as useless as ours. And I think educating our mayors in that sense of the way of, hey, you're not going to get away with this. You're not one of them. You can't just get on a private jet and go to an island and, wait for us on boats. Like, you literally have to face us. We're your neighbors. We live right around you. And then that's when the perspective changes. That's when it becomes, oh, do I take this incentive money? But I'm going to have to stay here too. I will be in prison in these 15-minute cities. And then you're going to have a lot of angry people around you that you basically stabbed in the back. And that perspective all of a sudden changes almost every single mayor's thoughts. And that's when they start realizing, well, I'm not being protected by these big groups that are making me do this. Like, I have to think about myself and, like where I will be in 5 years, and will I have to face my neighbors and the decisions that I have made. So that's the one thing that all of these local municipalities need to realize is there's nowhere to run. We're basically in this all together. This might be a short-term money deal that you might make, but at the end of the day, you won't be protected the way the super parasite, I call them lot lizards, are.
So with Thorhild in particular, what initiated the rural municipality to reach out for help on something? What was the initial problem that they had?
They did not have, like, the municipality itself or the farmers?
The municipality itself, what problem were they trying to solve? Because obviously they must have had a complaint and or some kind of problem that they reached out to this corporation to help them deal with, right?
No. So basically, the government of Canada told all municipalities in Alberta to revisit their land bylaw uses. And that was it. That's the only thing that they received is the government of Canada in 2019, I believe. They were told that they need to revisit things and make them more green so that they could be held according to the Paris Accord agreements, with the incentive of money for basically the municipality on, I guess, making it greener and more efficient. So it had nothing to do with the local people or local council or local mayors. It was actually a direct order from the above federal government.
So the federal government had put this on to all RMs in Alberta then, I'm going to presume, because on our RM, we haven't seen anything come down like that in Saskatchewan.
Yeah, so the way I've noticed, the way they work is they will go after the province or usually the place that's the loudest. So in Canada, Alberta, we are the loudest. We basically do not want much to do with Ottawa. We are our own province. And I think they thought that if they could get away with doing this in Alberta while we're so busy fighting other things, that they could kind of come in and backdoor this entire deal, then it would be a walk in the cake for them to do it in BC. Because in BC, I feel like people would volunteer to just jump off of a bridge for the government if they told them, especially in the Vancouver area, not in northern BC, but Vancouver area. They're programmed. And Ontario, also what people don't understand is Ontario's completely bringing in digital IDs and they're almost ready to roll them out and no one has said anything. So what they do is they create all these different problems in different provinces at different times so that none of us can focus on anything at once. And this is why I keep telling people, get involved locally so that you know what's going on locally. And then after we've kind of leveled the playing field, then we can kind of come together as a country and pretty much try and kick out the UN and all the rats that are involved in this plan. But the way they go about this is they will go to Alberta first, and then people in Saskatchewan will read their land bylaw use, and they'll be like, oh, okay, so that's just Alberta. That must be the Conservatives in Alberta, when it's actually the federal government. So once they're done with Alberta, then they'll move on to another province, and then other provinces will think, oh, okay, well, we're safe. It's never coming to us. And while they forget about that, they pretty much sneak in via loopholes, and then they come to your province without you even knowing. These people work so well in the shadows. They've been doing this for so many centuries, and they've done this even like throughout the pandemic. I know this is me kind of changing the subject, but they said China locked down when China never locked down. So they locked us down. China basically watched what the West did wrong. And then once we opened up, they locked down China. And so it's just this back and forth game that they're playing, where they're collecting data, trying to see where they went wrong, how they can improve and make it faster, and pretty much land grab in another province a lot easier. So they're also playing a chess game where they're collecting data to see what they can do quicker and faster and what's not going to work, so that they can roll these things out in other provinces much quicker. That's why they don't roll everything out in an entire country all at once.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, in the rural anyways, that's I touched on it earlier. It's a rural economic development. That doesn't mean that it's locally. Actually, right on the Government of Canada's website is the rural economic development playbook that they already have for the rural economic development, housing, skills and labor, connectivity. They got it all. Rural data, tourism, transit, you name it. So the federal government has already, and that's where they're trying to implement from the top down. And we just need to stop it and turn government around like it was designed to work and should be working, and that's from the bottom up.
Oh, I would love to see a government where we the people delegate to them, which is the way it's supposed to be, and not the other way around. The other way around is a dictatorship, and that's where we're headed.
Yeah, exactly. In regards to the land use, land grabs, in one of your videos, you talk about the Y to Y, or the Yukon to Yellowstone. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on that, because I think that these are the things that the listeners, especially the people that have not been reached before, that may be listening to this for the first time, there could be mayors, there could be, city officials, those kinds of people who are aware of the buzz that's going on out there. And all of this buzz does put a light on things, and it's opening up more eyes, every day as we go along. But we know that Freeland recently visited Grand Prairie, and we know that there's stuff going on there with the caribou. I just wanted to know if you could just touch a little bit more on that.
So the Y2Y group was basically under the NDP. It's called the Yellowstone to Yukon initiative, and it's another extension and arm of the UN and the entire Paris Climate Accord. They're actually out of Yellowstone. They're out of the United States. So when I first heard that basically the NDP wanted to land grab an entire section, and I mean an entire section from Yellowstone to Yukon, based on caribou migration and restoring the land. All of a sudden, I started to read into the fine print of what that actually meant, where they wanted to kick out any of the farmers that were already on that field. Basically, no one was allowed to go in with ATVs or hiking or any of that. And then they had Antifa go throughout the woods and put I believe those wires from trees to trees to scare off ATVers and dirt bikers, so that they wouldn't get injured. And I started to follow the paper trail, started calling the Y2Y group in the United States, wasn't getting anywhere, basically empty offices with no phones, nothing. And one of them I called and I said I would actually drive down to Yellowstone. I went, and it was just an empty building with just a sign on there. And so I basically started blasting that on Facebook at the time, doing phone calls, calling people in the area, making Facebook posts, and we started a protest. And basically, slowly, people started to get to know that, Rachel Notley was basically trying to land grab. And it just so happens that that area is also the richest in oil reserves. Because I looked that up, I was like, why caribou? Why in this area? And so I started Googling the entire area, and it was basically the entire oil reserve of Alberta and Montana and like Wyoming. And so I'm thinking, well, she's anti-oil. called us sewer rats. Anybody who's a farmer who works in the oil patch, they called sewer rats. And so I literally, my goal was just to get that hobbit out of here. That woman just, oh, she's just the worst. And the worst part is she's 20 minutes away from like where I am. That's where she grew up. And sometimes she comes for a visit up here. And so I have to literally tell myself not to go and see her and tell her exactly how I feel about her, because I'm always on her Twitter just calling her a hobbit, telling her to go back to her woodland creatures in her cave where she belongs. So basically, yeah, the Y2Y group is just another exact same group that wants to land grab, and they will do it in the name of caribou, and it's basically just fluff marketing, you know, just to get your heartstrings going. Oh, we need to save the caribou, oh, we need this, when in fact there are such sinister plans ahead. And I'm surprised that Freeland actually came to Grand Prairie. They must have not marketed that well, because had I known, whew, I would have showed up to that meeting.
Yeah, exactly why it happened so sneakily, right? Because I'm pretty sure there would have been a lot more people there if that had been announced.
Yeah, we look at what happened with Justin in Hamilton a week and a bit ago. Same thing, from a man who went from nice hair, great popularity, nice socks, all this in 2015 during the campaign, to not being able to walk the streets of the country that you are in charge of, so to speak, you're prime minister of, is shocking. And to your point here, we want to just want to draw this into our Manitoba listeners a little bit. Conservation efforts in Manitoba include the boreal forest. The boreal forest is 570,000 square kilometers in Manitoba. Our total land mass of the province is just under 650,000. So they're looking at grabbing, what I would say 7/8 of our province. We have 13.5 million acres of suitable land for cropping, and about 18 million acres total for farmland, whether it's ranching, pastures, and so on. So, when we look at their 30% by 2030, this whole land grab thing starts to look a whole lot different, because they're going for 7/8 or potentially more. I think it would be a lot more, it'd be 100% once you include smart cities in that. So this is something that people need to wake up to. And I'm not against preserving nature and certain things as well, but we only need to look at the grave missteps that our governments have had to do in the name of conservation, in the name of this, in the name of that. We look at bipole, I think it's bipole 3. The estimated time of completion went way overboard. We used up 2.5 times as many resources to actually build the hydro line. We zigzagged across the entire province instead of picking a streamlined route down Lake Winnipeg. And at the end of the day, we are producing only 47% of the electricity that we were promised, because all these extra miles, these 2.5 times the length of hydro lines, are now losing that hydroelectricity just through line loss, because the signal doesn't get through. You can put 100% in, down the line, you're not getting 100%. So we're getting 47%, and we had to pay 2.5 times as much to get it. So, when you talk about these people who are just there pushing numbers, they are pushing an agenda. And these are people are living right next door to us. We have people in our communities that are making these big decisions, and they need to be held accountable. We need to be talking to them on an ongoing basis.
I 100% agree. We need to be talking to all of our neighbors, and we need to start waking up our council members and our mayors. And this isn't the first failed project that they've had. They have carbon capturing, I guess, I don't know, projects around Alberta here, and they're actually creating 30% more carbon than they're actually capturing. So when I say that these people are not smart, they're not smart at all. They just have these ideas, but they don't have real world experience. And it's us who with real world experience, and we know how to manage our lands and our lives much better than these I call them lot lizard elites, and they're trying to tell us that they have the solutions to a problem that doesn't even exist, or to problems that they create. And I don't think that they're good at even creating the problems, let alone solving the problems. So basically, it needs to come down to we either take full advantage of the time that is now and come together and start basically, handling our own business, because it's clear that the business left within politicians' hands doesn't get done. It's just a ring around hamster wheel.
Yeah, exactly right. Because we only need to look at what our politicians are doing. They spend years campaigning, and then they spend another year or two just learning the processes. And then maybe we have 6 months where they're actually implementing, but then they get pushback. And then they're back on the campaign trail again because their 4 years is almost up and they need to start getting people talking about them so they can get reelected for the next term. And so it is a constant cycle of distractions and just nonsense where they're not doing their jobs. And I've said this before, we need to start looking for politicians that are willing to stick their neck out. They're a one term and they're done. They go in there and they go fix a whole bunch of problems, and then they get out because they have no hope of getting reelected. But they will have made some serious progress along the way. None of this 3 or 4 or 5, 6 months out of a 4-year term where they've actually made any progress that's, appreciable to anybody. And so, again, we talk about these elected elites or unofficial or unelected elites, all these nonsense people. They tend to spend an awful lot of time on computer models that seem to go off the charts time and time again. When we look at methane emissions and those types of things, they're not looking at real science. They're looking at what I would call junk science. And that's what they're basing some statistics on. They're pushing a document out that was peer reviewed by another corrupt, scientist or somebody who is paid off. And so this is the science that they're pushing. So it's time to dial things back and really look at what is actually going on. Because, every generation or every 10 years, it seems like there's a new level of fear, whether it's global warming or it's the hole in the ozone or it's climate change or it's we're going to freeze to death. All these things have all happened in my lifetime, and I'm not that old yet. So it's like they just keep creating different models, different schemes to keep the entire society in a state of heightened fear and heightened awareness, is that we have to throw more money at it. We have to keep doing this. We have to keep doing that. And at the end of the day, we haven't been able to measure anything because the statistics just aren't there to back it up. And to your point about the carbon capture, I remember in the 80s and 90s, farmers are trying to pump the exhaust gas from the tractor into the ground and till it in and capture carbon that way. Horrible idea. Like, who thought this was going to work? And it didn't, and it's just, we keep doing this over and over, and it's like you're expecting a different result. And it's like, no, you got to use some real stuff. And I'm not saying that there isn't room for improvement. There is. Let's work with the 2, 3, 5%, maybe 10% that we can move. None of this overnight and we're going to change the world. It's like, has never happened.
That is very correct. I believe part of their propaganda is also to keep us distracted on these huge world problems that we can't solve, so that we actually don't pay attention to what's exactly under our noses, stuff that we can control. And so we've become this lazy society of just slap a sticker on your Facebook page and say you support support this cause, and all of a sudden your virtue signaling makes you a good person, but you don't actually get involved in your own community to actually change your community and change yourself as a person, which will actually change the world. And that's what I'm trying to teach people, is to self-reflect and only control the things that they can control. We cannot control world wars. We cannot control things that are completely out of our control. And so what we have to do is we have to fix things on a local level. And if we all did that around the world, then we would actually see a massive shift and a massive change in actually getting results, instead of just talking about it, slapping stickers on Facebook and calling ourselves virtue signaling soldiers. So that's what I'm trying to teach people, is to avoid the bigger problems that we can't control and actually control the things that we can.
So with that, I've heard you use the word blockchain. And so for our everyday listeners, how do you see that, and how does this tie in? Because I think this is, again, one of those things that is thrown out there, and people don't really understand it. They don't know what it fully is. Can you walk us through some of those, some of your experience or some of your knowledge that you have on that?
So you mean blockchains such as CBDCs?
Well, it could be CBDCs, but I think maybe even like to the bigger picture of what the blockchain actually is and what it actually involves. Are you up on that, or?
I'm not sure if you mean how they basically link everything together, or...
And Tiana, you talked in one of your videos about how the UN is enslaving humanity, and that's leading us towards digital IDs and how digital currencies work, and you talked a little bit about blockchain there. And I don't think, like Dave said, I don't think a large majority of people even understand that. So it's just, yeah, I love Dave's question, and it'd be great if you could elaborate a little bit about that.
Oh, okay. So with blockchains, I meant with CBDCs, which are basically digital currencies that are coming down the pipeline. And blockchains are programmable. How should I say this in layman terms? They're programmable little, I guess, a chain. So for example, just think of it this way. You have a coin, a dollar coin, and each time you buy something on that coin, in tiny little programmable things, it writes down your name, who you sold it to, who you gave it to, what you bought, what was sold, what time, and everything. And that gets pretty much programmed onto that coin, so that you can see the blockchain of how it was used as a tender from the moment it came out of the factory. And so if we kind of look at this in a broader spectrum, that means if you have a garage sale and I go and I buy something from you and I pay in blockchains or CBDCs, they're programmable. That means if I try and e-transfer you that blockchain, the government can literally say, I have had too many carbon credits and I can't pay you. So then the money that I even do have as CBDCs in my bank account can be held against me if I reach a certain limit or if my social credit system is down. So basically what they will do in order for you to unlock the ability to use those blockchains, because they are programmable, they will either have you pay a fine or you won't be able to use your money for a week. And it will be like going to Facebook jail, where you don't really kind of have a say. And it will get pretty dark. And they've used, and then in the sense of how everything's connected in blockchains with the UN is basically everything that they do is connected to another thing, but it always leads to the main goal, and that is enslavement of humanity. And if you follow their steps like a blockchain, you will realize that this plan has been in the making for at least a century, and they've just been chipping slowly and slowly away, adding blockchains basically of a trail leading back to their plan of what they've constantly wanted to do.
Does. And what I kind of was thinking too is, remember the old Hudson Bay days, where if you worked for the Hudson Bay Company up north at a post, you would be paid in Hudson Bay dollars, and you would only be able to use them at the Hudson Bay Company. So all of your merchandise, everything would be marked up 2-3 times higher than what it should be. But because you were forced to pay in Hudson Pay dollars and you could only shop at Hudson Pay, I see this going the same way, where you have people that signed up with this blockchain technology, all their connections, whether they like the internet, all their servers, all their computers, everything, or whoever is on board is signed up with this. So if you are at this garage sale and that person isn't on board with this blockchain that you're on board with, well, you can no longer do a transaction. Is that what I understand here? Do we see that going it that way?
Yeah, that's definitely the way they want to do it. And so what they will do is either they will crash the entire economy and force everybody onto the same blockchain, or it will be a voluntary system where they will have initiatives in the beginning of, well, if you use blockchains instead of cash, then every, like, for example, let's say President's Choice thing will be 30% less. And so people will run to it to get the 30% less, not realizing that it's actually a trap to entrap you, because once they get enough numbers, basically they can then mark up however high they want the President Choice brands or whatever brands that they choose. And that is how they will conglomerate all corporations basically to be under government control. So all of these corporations that think that they're getting away with everything, they don't understand they're on the chopping block. It's just that their time isn't in 5 years, but it's in about 10 or 15 years. And that is how they pin us against each other. And that's how they pin each pyramid level against each other, because each pyramid level higher up thinks that they will be safe from the chopping block, but in fact, we're all on it and we're all the same. They're just using us and our egos against each other. And so basically with blockchains, it will be to enslave us. And that way they can program it with what you can use and what you can't use and where you can use them. So privatization will be completely dead. There will be no mom and pop shops.
Well, and that's exactly what I see going on right now, is that they're incentivizing mom and pop shops to go digital, to get onto this new banking system. And right now on the surface, it looks exactly like your debit credit card machine that you see at every other cash register in the country. But going forward, I see this being connected digitally. And one of the incentives these big companies have, or actually like, the blockchain holders or these big corps or whatever you want to call them, is they're instantaneous. Because right now, if you're going through a bank system, you have a 2-3 day delay to get your money. Perhaps it's 24 hours, maybe it's 6 hours, depending on your arrangement. But once we get onto blockchain, it's instantaneous. So either your credit is good or bad. It's at the click of a button, or RFID or whatever mechanism they're using. So you making a transaction at a garage sale will no longer be negotiable. It either happens or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, you're going home empty-handed. There's no recourse. There's no nothing. And when I look at our incidents here in the province over Christmas, we had some situations even with the Métis people unable to use their digital card to go into Manitoba liquor store because it wasn't a recognized card. It is today. They've just started that over the weekend, as I understand. But until then, you had to provide a Manitoba-issued driver's license or a passport to go into a liquor store, just to go in. You don't actually have to buy anything, but you have to scan your card just to go in. And there again, too, who's collecting this data and what are they doing with it? We see different names attached to companies out of Alberta that are tracking this information, that are using it, but we know the web is not secure. How do I know that what my data is doing? What is the government doing with my data, and why are they collecting it, and how potentially are they going to turn this around and use this against me? And this is the big thing when we look at technology, and you've said this, we've come light years in the last 100 years. And it's technology and the data collection that has enabled them to turn the screws ever tighter on us, because they know our habits, they know our human tendencies, and now they can turn and use that against us to perpetuate their profits or their agenda, whatever that may be, because it isn't always clear what they're pushing, whether it is profit or agenda, and I suspect both.
It definitely is both. I call them really bad drug dealers. Just the way drug dealers will give out free drugs just to get people addicted, and then they will start basically charging for the drugs, and then they will up and up their prices. That's what basically this entire shadow government has done. They got us used to consume and obey, consume and obey. And now that we're all addicted to this consumer lifestyle because we're all so unhappy and unfulfilled, and they've separated us as humans with no human connection, well, now they're going to cut that out. So now they're going to add credit scores or carbon credits to everything that we buy. And basically now they're going to take that addiction that we have for consumerism and they're going to cut it short. Either you're going to have to get off and wean off of the consumer wheel, or you're going to pay more. And they know that the will of human beings isn't that strong and that people will pay as much as they need for their addictions. So basically they have created this problem and then they called us a problem, and now they're pretending that they have the solutions, but it's actually just to enslave humanity. So they make the worst version of a human being and then they point fingers at us, and now they're saying, well, we need to make you better human beings, and that we can only do that by enslaving all of you, because look at what you're doing to the planet. And it's this psychological propaganda that they have been playing for so long. And now that we have perpetuated technology to a point where basically it can be Big Brother even without cameras, we are headed for a digital enslavement that will be extremely, extremely hard to get out of.
Well, everything at this point plays into the sustainable development goals, the 17 of those. That's what they're trying to obtain right now. And at the end is basically what we're talking about with blockchain and the International Monetary Fund and the way that the World Bank and blah, blah, blah. So we're not quite there yet. We got, I think there's a lot of positive things we're winning along the way. But I think, for our listeners, the SDGs are the main point that they're trying to implement at the moment.
Yeah. And with the SDGs, there is a huge component, and that's population reduction. So all these smart cities and all these wonderful things that they're, holding that carrot in front of the everyday consumer, is that how wonderful and glorious these things are going to be. They're trying to do exactly the opposite, is to oppress you and eliminate you or the potential for you to have any future offspring. And that's really what I see. Like they also have time on their hands because they're willing to wait a generation or push as hard as they can on this one and ensure that there isn't any future children to replace us. And, let's not forget the maid service that the government is offering so they can go and harvest more organs. Like that's what Canada is doing right now. We have the highest organ donation, the highest organ donor of any country in the world right now. And it's all due to the maid. All these people are signing away their organs. So it's like we have become the Las Vegas desert of the 70s where, a liver or a kidney could go missing depending which hotel you slept in.
Honestly, I totally see it. They have something called Project Neom or Neom, and they have 5 cities where they will pretty much put the rest of us that are alive by 2050. And this is all online. And they have super cool commercials of how awesome these cities will be and that we're not allowed to leave them. We're only going to be allowed 3 items of clothing, basically a year, and how we will have everything within these small, tiny villages that they make that are walled in, surprisingly. So it's called Project Neom, and they basically want to take all of humanity that is left and put them into the 5 projects that they have going on in either the desert or the mountains. So I can definitely see the depopulation plan has been in effect for many years now. They just kind of sped it up in 2020.
I totally see. I think they really ramped up when we hear our politicians saying that they need to take advantage of the situation. It's already been planned. The playbook was written long before this, and it just got executed at that time. Again, while everybody else was distracted and focused on other things, and this quote unquote pandemic.
Completely agree.
Would you say that the RMs in particular really know what they're doing? Because from what I see, a lot of people don't realize what they're passing and what they're doing. They're chasing incentives, either or trying to fix problems and come up with solutions without being responsible with coming up with ideas for the solutions themselves locally.
I honestly don't believe they know what they're doing. I don't think they see the larger picture, and I don't think the government told them that there is a larger picture. I think they're just going after incentive of getting money for their RM so that they seem like a good politician. I think that's all it is. And the way these salespeople approach these RM officials is basically as a sales pitch of, well, we have this incentive, you volunteer for it, you'll have a greener city or area, and we'll give you this much money if you just implement these like super small changes, and it's no big deal. And then once they sign up for it, that's, I think, when the negotiations kind of get harder and harder on them. And I'm not sure if they can back out of the incentives without people rising up and voicing their concern for what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, as the article says here in Saskatchewan, and our group, with digital IDs and tying it to healthcare, as maybe you've read already, our Premier Scott Moe has come out before the Premier's meeting tomorrow and already said that they will not allow digital IDs to be tied to healthcare. And so, yeah, that's good. But we have formed them here locally, and so we got them on board with listening to us, and that's what needs to be done is to get in touch with your MLAs, MPs, and premiers to create the environment you want, and make your voices heard from a grassroots level up.
Exactly. And I definitely think everybody needs to get involved on every level, and really start collaborating with each other with the information that's available out there, and start sharing as neighbors, as communities, with what we find and who these people are that are coming in with these sales pitches from the UN and from these other subgroups and NGO groups, and to really start basically smoking out the rats on a local level. And then eventually it will become a provincial level, and then it will grow into a Canadian level, and they won't have anywhere to hide, and they won't be able to do anything because we will all be aware of the games that they're playing and the things that they're trying to implement in the shadows.
Because we're uncovering this stuff day by day, and there seems to be a lot of information that has been going on for decades. What if we find out that some of our sovereignty has already been handed out, or what potentially will be this coming September? We know that September is a big month. Is there any recourse if we don't get it all done by then for the next 5-10 years? Can we reclaim this and start undoing some of the nonsense that has already been done, and go back to the Canada that we know and love?
Absolutely. I always tell people, I'm like, laws are just words on a piece of paper, and you just take that piece of paper and you rip it. I mean, if they wrote it on a piece of paper and implemented it, we can just not follow it. And then what are they going to do? It's a lot of people, I think, take the entire writing on piece of paper and then implementing it as, end all be all. But at the end of the day, I tell them, if the government told you to jump off a bridge and wrote it on a piece of paper, wouldn't you ask why? Wouldn't you say that this isn't okay, this isn't right? Well, we need to do that with all laws. We need to really kind of, go forward and review what we're being told that we need to follow, and we need to start asking questions of why. I'm not going to follow that. I mean, we did it to our parents when we were teenagers. We just have to find that spirit again and do it to the government. I mean, I understand seatbelts, that's for our safety. There's proof that seatbelts help. But I mean, with the vaccine, I know a lot of people were saying, well, it's like a seatbelt. I'm like, well, no, not really. The seatbelt was proven to help. The vaccine so far is doing the opposite. And so the more of us ask these questions, the more we are honest with ourselves and truthful, and we just stop listening to mainstream media because they are part of the propaganda tool, and we really start discussing these issues amongst ourselves. I think that's basically when we will get our sovereignty back. And if not, then we all denounce basically, I don't know, everything from the government. We do a worldwide strike, and at the end of the day, they need us more than we need them. So it just depends on how far people are willing to get pushed and how much they're willing to lose.
We need to stop handing over our money so freely. because the government can't hand out anything they haven't collected from us.
Exactly.
Tiana is just basically talking about, mass noncompliance. And I know you've spoken about that before, and the sovereign human being. And I think, just to close this out, you speak so eloquently and with conviction about that topic. And I don't think that people actually realize how simple and easy that is. I mean, as kids, talking about jumping off a bridge, I don't know about you guys, but that's one of the first things that we were taught is, if Sally at school tells you to jump off a bridge with her, are you going to jump off the bridge with her? It's just like, well, no. But we're seeing, we saw that happen, right? And it's amazing that we saw so many do that. But yeah, if you could just touch on the mass noncompliance and the sovereign human being, that would be great, Tiana, and then we can wrap this up.
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell people I came onto this planet, and whatever religion or whatever you believe in, I believe that God gave me human natural laws, and that I have the freedom of will to make my own moral choices as long as my moral compass is right. So as long as I'm not hurting anybody else with my decisions, and I know I'm right in the sense that I have taken all the proof with me, and I can see what is happening via research, then I believe that everybody else should really be responsible for their own decisions and their own thoughts. And I feel like a lot of us have just let the TV and the governments and our friends and basically other entities control our thoughts and control who we are and control our moral compass. And I always tell people, if something feels wrong internally, don't go along with the masses. It's basically called mass non-compliance. Had we all just stuck together during 2020, the government couldn't have done anything. If we just went, you know what, I'm not seeing anybody drop dead right now. You guys are saying this on TV. I just went to the hospital. It's completely empty. I mean, what is really going on? And we openly started talking about this without criticizing one another for basically criticizing the TV based on what versus what we see. I think if we were just more honest and we basically used our God-given rights to make our own decisions, we wouldn't be in this mess that we're in. We basically would start talking to each other, and we would start seeing each other as friends, and not the TV and not the government as our parents and as our guardians and our guidance. That should come from within, and from a moral standing. I believe that we could all be sovereign human beings who are very well integrated with each other, no matter what skin color, religion, or belief. As long as we have respect for one another and we don't push each other in certain directions, and we basically live and let live, but we have certain rules where we just kind of keep out of each other's business and keep polite. I think we would make strides as a society and as a world towards basically having world peace and having sovereign human beings on this planet.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that would bode well for everybody in our neighborhoods as well. If we started just being a little bit more civil, a little bit more polite, we could affect one community in one city at a time, and really, really make a big difference.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this has been a delight, Tiana. And for our listeners, you can find Tiana, her handle on Rumble, Twitter, and Instagram is Truthseeker01011, and TikTok. She's alive and well so far on all of those platforms, and has a couple of backup plans. We talked a little bit about that this morning. Of course, as we know, the truth tellers and the dissidents seem to get shut down. And so, yeah, you've got a few backup plans, which is great. So that's Truthseeker01011, TikTok, Rumble, Twitter, and Instagram. So again, thank you so much, Tiana. We really appreciate you joining us tonight. This has been very educational, and I think that our listeners are going to love hearing about this, and we couldn't be more appreciative.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really appreciative that you guys gave me the opportunity to speak with you tonight.
That's a wrap, folks. You've been listening to an Acres of Truth special edition podcast series. We would like to thank you so much for joining us in this journey. If you found this episode valuable, please share it with others on your social media platforms. Be sure to check out our website, acresoftruth.com, for more information on other podcasts and where you can find them. Additionally, feel free to send your questions or comments to info@acresoftruth.com. Thanks again for listening.